worked on two of the most well-received reboots in recent time and living the dream of killing Nazis and demons from hell for a living. Please give it up for Aydin Afzoud!
Alright, so now that we have gotten all the history and personal stuff out of the way, let's look at you, the students, and what I can offer you. Well, since I've been in your exact same position here at the university as a student, and since I've spent a long time in the industry, I can offer you something very valuable, which is advice. And these are advice that I wish I had heard during my time here at the university. And I chop it up in two parts. So I start out with some advice for aspiring game designers, like practical advice of what you can do to become a better game designer. And then general advice for students, like for everybody. So first of all, you should get a firm understanding of what game design is. Game design is not opinion about games, like having opinions about games is not game design. Like ideas about games are not game design either. Game design is actionable information regarding how features work, how they interact, and how they play out. So I say this because when I was in the university here, there was an idea that either you were an artist or you were a programmer. And if you could not do art and if you could not program, you became a game designer or a producer. And the game designer thing there was kind of a fuzzy, like it could be everything from balance, game balance, to narrative design, to level design, or just like loose opinions about the game. But that's not what it is. It's actionable information regarding how features work, how they interact, and how they play out in the game. So when people ask me, like chess is a good example I used to take when people ask me what I do. Like I always reply that I'm a game designer, and the inevitable question is like, what is that? So I use the chess as an example. So I always tell them that the rules in chess is the game design of that particular game, and the chessboard is the level design. And how the pieces look is just art and aesthetics. There's like Harry Potter chess, Star Wars chess, Jurassic Park chess, Dragon chess, all kinds of chess. But that's creative direction. But the game design, the core of the game, it remains the same. It's concerned with the mechanics of the game and how it plays out. So now then that we have gotten a good quick look on game design and what it actually is, let's talk about the skills that will help you as a game designer. Oh, that was nice. That alien chess, that's neat. Anyways, first of all, communication skills are very important. You are expected to clearly and concisely be able to explain and document a feature in a way that everybody involved with the project can understand. Written and verbal communication, especially in English, is very, very, very important. The next skill that will help you in your career is social skills. Being a game designer is not just sitting in an ivory tower writing game design documents and uploading it to Perforce, hoping for them to get made. Half of the work is actually making sure that the game design gets implemented in the game. And that means that you will have to have a hands-on approach and personally make sure that the design gets into the game. And that can take maneuvering, it can take compromise, and it can take politics. So a lot of game design work is actually overlapping producer work, which means that you should be able to socially interact with people in a meaningful way to get the design into the game. And that leads us to criticism. You should be able to take criticism, and you should be able to handle it well, because people who hate your design, they will or might end up hating you. And if anything fails, you will be the one who's responsible for it. When things go wrong, it always comes back to game design. So you will have to be prepared for some serious and, from your point of view, very unfair attacks on both your design and yourself as a person. So verbal, of course, not physical attacks. So you will have you need a thick skin. And finally, the ability to compromise is very important. Game design is not set in stone. It will always change in one way or another. So you need to be open to other people's ideas. Don't cling to your design in a dogmatic way. More often than not, feedback and input from team members will lead to a better design, which in turn leads to a better game, which in turn leads to a better product. So, be open, because people often have great ideas. Those skills are sort of meta. Like, it's hard for you as a student now to, after this talk, go home and spend 1 hour to become better at social skills or taking criticism. But this right here is something concrete, practical, and useful that you can do that will help you, train you to become a better game designer. And that is to analyze the games that you play. This is very important if you're serious in becoming a game designer. And I highly recommend you doing this. It's very important. So when you play games, be vigilant and be analytical. Try to identify features, big or small, and try to deconstruct them and reverse engineer them on a theoretical level. So, like, what is this feature? How does it work? Why did they add it? What were they thinking when they added it? Are there any alternatives to this feature? And then spend a half an hour or just 1 hour and write a one-page design document of the feature you're deconstructing. Try to formulate the design document in a way so a programmer, an animator, effects artist, audio artist would be able to read, understand, and get the information that they would need to start working on that feature. This is a very good and practical exercise that you can do. So I've prepared some examples of what I mean, so let's take a look at them. So this is a video from Uncharted 4. So like you and your two buddies, you're running around killing people and stealing stuff, which is what you do in Uncharted. And in this particular scenario, you're driving a jeep up a mountain to kill and steal stuff, and you have to get out and lower a bridge so you can continue killing and stealing stuff. So you're here with your two friends. So let's look at this. Maybe, yes. That right there. Let's look at it again. It's that thing, that thing right there. So when you play the game, you should hone in on stuff like, what was that? Why did it do that? What I mean is that when you walk up to the car, the game takes the camera control away from the player, and it moves the camera and plays that enter animation. It's like, why do they do that? So you should hone in on stuff like that and try to deconstruct it, reverse engineer it, and try to understand what the designers did and what problems they solved with that design, because that is a design choice right there. So when I reverse engineer this feature, I try to understand like why they did that, and I came to this conclusion. Maybe you come up with some other conclusion, but this was my conclusion. So you're running around freely with your two friendly AIs that will follow you around, but since you as a player is able to put some serious distance between you and your friends, that means that you can end up in a scenario where you get into the car and you have to wait for the AIs to path all the way to the car and line up their positions and play their enter animation. So that can present a pacing problem or a technical problem. Perhaps the AI cannot path to your car. Perhaps the guy in the red shirt who sits in the passenger, like it's set up like this. The guy in the red shirt sits in the passenger seat, and the guy in the blue shirt sits in the back seat. Like perhaps you parked your car in a way like near a cliff or a corner or a wall that prevents the AIs from reaching their positions. That's a problem. That's a problem that the game designer needs to solve. Another problem is that you would be able to drive away without your friends. That can be remedied by preventing the player from doing so, by disabling the controls of the car until the AIs have gotten into the car. But that's super annoying, and you never want to take control away from the player in-game. So those are some of the problems I see when I analyze the alternatives that exist to this feature. So my conclusion is that they simply solve all those problems by just taking the camera away from the player, despawn the friendly AI wherever they are in the map, and then just play an animation. Like when these guys get into the car, they probably are not AIs. They just like animations playing VO and stuff. So when you jump out of the car, they also jump out and they become AI and they start reacting to enemies and covers and stuff like that. Plus, with this solution, not only do you solve all the problems with pathing AI, but you also take the camera and place it behind the car so the player always sees where he's driving when he starts driving. Like you don't have to do the GTA 5 thing where you align the camera after the car. So that's just an example of what I mean by analyzing features in games that you play while you're playing them. You should keep your eyes open for stuff like that. Another example, exploding barrels. You've probably seen them in a lot of games. Here we got Doom, Half-Life 2, and I think that's Far Cry 3. Usually you just shoot them, you watch them explode, and you don't think more about it. But be sure that some game designer somewhere have sat down and written a game design document for it. And that's what you also should do. You should write a game design document for exploding barrels. Now, try to identify all the elements and all the parts of that feature and write them down in a document so people can understand it. Like, how do they work? How do they distribute damage? What decides who gets the damage? What causes them to explode? Like, is there some damage they're immune to? Or is there some damage, like, do they always explode? There's a lot of questions that you, as a game designer, need to answer. Just a case of how damage gets distributed. Like, is it 100% damage everywhere, or is there a fall off? If so, why? What's the point of having that in the design? And how much is that fall off? Over how long of a distance? For instance, in the first example, to the left here, there's an inner radius where they take 100% damage, and there's an outer radius which the damage falls off in a linear fashion. So in the right example, the inner radius is much larger and the fall off quicker over a shorter distance. Like, what problems do each solution present? Like, you should be able to identify that and answer that as a game designer. What happens to the enemy number one there, who's half covered by the explosion? Like, should that enemy take damage? Shouldn't it take damage? If so, why? Explain it in the document. Like, do enemies need to play an animation when they get affected? Will you need different animations on the amount of damage taken? Like, what happens if two enemies are taking the same equal amount of damage? How do you prevent them from playing the exact same animation played at the same time? Because that will look silly if two people do the same animation. What if there's another barrel in the blasting area? Will that barrel explode instantly to make it appear like there's a huge explosion, or will it be a delay? What happens if the player stands in the blast radius? Is the damage to the player equal to the damage of the AI? Stuff you need to define. Like, if the barrel, like, instead of exploding directly, starts burning, should AIs try to get away from the barrel, or should they just ignore it? Those are just some of the questions that you need to answer and define as a game designer when you write the barrel game design document. And maybe it's not just damage. Maybe it's maybe the explosions have other effects based on proximity. Like, what are those effects? I think the exploding barrel design is a great exercise for game designers to try out, because when you do that, when you sit down and try to define everything about the exploding barrel, you will do the exact same work that you will do as a game designer in the game design industry. It's the exact same stuff you will do. So the last example of identifying features in games while you play them and try to analyze them is the Naxxramas attunement quest in World of Warcraft. This was way back in 2006 or something. So what happened was that Blizzard released a huge free content patch with a large instance that high-level players could raid and kill bosses and earn loot and stuff. So now one has to remember that when you play World of Warcraft, you effectively pay for the time you play. So it's in Blizzard's best interest to make sure that things take time to accomplish. After all, that's what they're selling to you. Like, they're selling, like, you're renting your character basically. So what they do is that they dangle something desirable in front of you, something that you want, and then they put lots of obstacles that take time to overcome between you and that desirable thing. That's a very tricky thing to do, because the game developers need to hide and camouflage those obstacles as much as possible, so the player don't feel cheated. Some games succeed in doing that, others fail, and those who fail get dogged with accusations of being grindfests with no purpose and like being cheap, and like players feel cheated. Blizzard, however, does it expertly, and that right there is game design and quest design, expertly made. So let's take this quest as an example. So a huge amount of fresh content gets released, but it will do no good to have the players just access that content right away, because they would just finish it and then they would start to wait for the next content patch. So instead, you as a player, you had to reach at least Honored with a in-game faction called Argent Dawn. Now, to do that, you would have to use Argent Dawn Valor tokens, and each Valor token would increase your reputation with 25. So to get a Valor token, you would have to collect Scourge Stones. Scourge Stones, they're dropped from mobs that spawned in the world. So you had to collect 20 Scourge Stones to get one Argent Dawn Valor token. And each mob you killed also gave you 5 reputation. So in the game, it was presented as an invasion. Like, you would have to kill the invading Scourge forces to prove to the Argent Dawn, the guy there, that you were an enemy to the Scourge. It was a kind of fun and engaging quest. Like, it did not feel like a horrible grind fest, even though it was. But why didn't it feel like a huge grind fest? So let's make an example. Now, let's say you were neutral with Argent Dawn. That means that you would have to grind up 9,000 reputation points. So you kill the easiest mobs, the ones that drop the minion Scourge Stones, and let's say that's a 40% drop rate, which is kind of nice drop rate. And each kill also gives you 5 rep. That gives us this equation. Or if you want to get really advanced, you have this formula. Thanks to Sai, by the way, for helping me out with the equations and formula. Your help is greatly appreciated. So now, as you can see in the top one, you would have to kill 1,636 mobs to reach 9,000 reputation. After you did that, you would also have to give the Argent Dawn 5 arcane crystals, which is about 10% drop rate from high-level thorium veins. You would have to give them 2 Nexus crystals, which you got from destroying high-level gear that you had gotten in, like, spent time to get. And also you have to give them 1 Righteous Orb, which had a 5% drop rate in a certain instance. And on top of that, you also had to give them 60 gold. And back then it took between 10 and 8 hours to farm 60 gold. So This quest, as you can see, is a huge, huge time sink, but it's not perceived that way because of the excellent design of the quest and how it's chopped up into smaller parts. So just imagine how it would have been received by the players if the quest was like this. Go out, spend 20 hours killing 1,636 mobs, and then spend 20 hours collecting gold crystals and orbs, like 40 hours before you can access this content which we have prepared for you. People would go nuts. Like they would cancel their subscription. But since the quest is so excellently and expertly crafted, people don't perceive it that way. And that right there is game design. And that's something you should do. When you do these grind quests, you should say, like, how is this quest really made up? Like, how much do I really need to kill? What were the game designers thinking, or quest designers? So that's my advice in helping you become a better game designer. Those are some exercises you can do. Now, let's move on to general advice regarding your time here at the university to prepare yourself in the best way possible for a career in the games industry. So, first of all, stop playing World of Warcraft. This is not a joke, seriously. I don't say that you should stop playing World of Warcraft because it's a bad game. On the contrary, it's an extremely good game, which is why it can take a huge amount of your time. So you need to realize that the 3 years you have here at Gotland are extremely, extremely valuable. You will never, ever be in a situation again where you get paid by the state to be on an island surrounded by creative people who want to make games. It's just a fact of life. You will never get that opportunity again. So if you play World of Warcraft or Dota or any other game for hours upon hours every day, my advice to you is stop doing that, because they're too good. They simply take too much of your time. So moderation is key. And like if you play games during class, if you sit with your laptop and you play games during class, that right there is a warning flag. It's a red flag. Like, stop doing that. You're wasting your time. So I myself played a lot of World of Warcraft. I mean, a lot of World of Warcraft. So I did the whole raid thing, hardcore PvP, high warlord, did everything. I played from the start up until the Burning Crusade. And one day, when I was running around in Nagrand killing Alliance, players were talking in the world chat about, like, oh, I played a game 187 days. And some guy said, well, I played it 65 days. Like, people were bragging about how much they played the game. So I got curious. And I wrote /time in the chat. And I saw the total number of days which I had played World of Warcraft. And when I saw that number, I just logged out. I didn't say goodbye to my guildmates or anything. I just logged out, deleted all my characters, uninstalled the game, called Blizzard to cancel my account. You could call them back then, by the way. And I never touched it since, ever. So, yeah, thank you. So, it's not that I regret that I played World of Warcraft. It's the only thing I regret is not stop playing it sooner. So, like I say, moderation is key, and these years are extremely valuable. So, don't waste them. And speaking of your time here, make games. Seriously, make games. This is your chance. The nifty thing here is that right now it's comparatively easy to make games. You have access to a lot of free and powerful tools and engines, Unity, Unreal 4, GameMaker, etc. So you can easily get a team together and make one for yourself. And if you can't make one for yourself, just mod games that have modding capabilities, because that will also teach you a lot of stuff. I won't spend any more time here trying to convince you to make games while you're here at Gotland, because Teddy Sjöström of Pixel Ferrets held a very good talk during the AlumniDays 2013 explaining it. So check out his excellent 2013 talk. You can find it on YouTube if you just search for his name, Teddy Sjöström. Check it out, it's very valuable information. Another thing is that game ideas are dime a dozen, or rather they're dime 100. Like everyone have their dream game that they want to make, and everybody got cool ideas of cool games, but nobody's going to steal your idea. Chances are that your idea is already based on other people's ideas. So I'm not saying that your idea is a bad idea. Maybe it's an awesome idea. And that's why you should write a design document and a short pitch and show it to as many people as possible. Maybe people will get interested, and maybe your idea will get made into a game, actually. I'll use myself as an example here. So I had a neat little idea for a game back in 2004 when I was playing Half-Life 2. So I took this screenshot the second I came up with that idea. Like, this is that exact same screenshot from 12 years ago. You can see the nice 4:3 format also. We didn't have widescreen back then, so. Anyways, so in the game I picked up a paint can with a gravity gun and I launched it at a zombie. And it was a nice effect of paint splattered on the zombie. Pretty neat, pretty nice. The splatter effect also showed up if you shot the paint can at walls or ceilings or floors. Now there was a bug in my graphics card that made the splatter effect not react to light at all. So like the paint became emissive. So I would take the paint can, this was in Ravenholm of course, and I would shoot the paint can in dark areas to see the geometry. It's like, oh, I see. And because like the dark areas shone up bright. So I came up with this idea, like, what if there's a game where the entire world is just one color and there is no depth, and you as a player have to shoot paint at it to see it. Like, you would have a white screen and you would shoot out a blob of paint and you would see, oh, there's a table, and oh, there's a doorway. I should go through that. And you go through it and it's like, where am I now? And you shoot out another paint blob and you're like, oh, I'm in a corridor. And you keep going and you're like, I'm outside. There's the woods, there's the park bench, there's a duck or something. So, well, 2012, 8 years later, that game came out, and it's called The Unfinished Swan. And that game did just that. And it was kind of an indie hit. I had nothing to do with that game. And I'm not saying that the people that made that game copied my idea or stole my idea. I know for a fact that they did not do that, because I never told anyone about my idea and I never wrote it down anywhere. So it was just in my brain. So I didn't tell anyone not because I thought that people would steal it, well, maybe a little, but mainly because of the fact that, like, I never did a pitch. Like, I just had it along with other awesome game ideas that I had in my head for years. But in hindsight, I see that Gotland would have been the perfect place to actually realize my idea. I should have written a pitch document and showed it to as many people as possible. Perhaps even try to do it myself in Unity. So learn from my mistake. Share your ideas with people, because there is an infinitely larger chance that your idea actually gets made if you tell people about it. So, my next advice to you is don't make enemies. This is the most valuable advice you will ever get during your time here in the university. And this is the one advice you should not ignore. Creating enemies during your time here at the university will, without a doubt, be the largest professional mistake that you will ever do. And that's a very bad way to start your game industry career, to make the biggest professional mistake. Your peers here at the university will be the next generation of game developers, and the game industry is very small and word gets around very quickly. So the fact is that your classmates will either make sure you get jobs or they will make sure you get denied jobs. I know for a fact a lot of people that have gotten their applications denied for various reasons, for various jobs, because they made enemies during their time here at the university. And they don't even know it themselves. Like, they just get a rejection. They don't know that the rejection was because the employer had asked one or more of their peers from the school, and they told stuff. So the people you apply, they will investigate you, and they will contact old classmates, and they will ask what kind of person you are. And even if your enemy is the least skilled person in the class, and you are absolutely sure that he or she will never make it into the games industry, there is a chance that when you apply for your dream job, your enemy will already be there, or it will get contacted by an employer and be asked to say a few words about you. And then you will be denied. And you will never know why. You will never know that it was because of your demeanor here at the university. So if you've been racist, misogynistic, if you're bullying people, if you like to spread rumors or talk shit about people, your chances will not be very great when you apply for work. So change your ways. Another thing is, this is more of a heads up, like a fact of life, and it's that it's not always the most skilled person that gets the job. It's the one who's at the right time, at the right place, and often knows the right man or woman. So if you get rejected when you apply, don't let it crush you. Often it just means that someone just happened to be the more convenient or safe choice at that time for that company. So don't let it eat you up. Just keep honing your skills and keep trying. That's it. That's all I have.
Hello. I have two questions. One's kind of serious and one not. The first one is, how is it to work in the industry for someone that is Middle Easterner, or looks like Middle Eastern?
It's kind of life. I mean, it's not that much different working in the games industry as a Middle Easterner as living in the normal Swedish society as a Middle Easterner. It's as hard. It's just as hard. So nothing gets better or worse. It just stays the same.
And my second question is, how many days was it?
Actually, people have asked me this because when I tell people don't play World of Warcraft, sometimes I tell that story also, and they're like, well, how many days was it? And there's a reflex that your brain has to protect you from stuff. So I could not for the life of me remember those numbers because my brain just burnt those synapses away. It's better if you don't know. So, yeah.
Hi, Aydin. That was an amazing talk.
Thank you.
I thought your example of exploding barrels was really great as well.
Thank you.
And I was wondering, like you said, you can make so many different features for that barrel. How do you choose which feature works the best with the game you're making?
You have to have some kind of. First, you have to have a good idea of what would fit in the game. You will have to get a general direction of what would fit in the game, what would fit in combat. We can't have a barrel that obliterates the entire room, but then again we just can't have something like just a fart. So I think it's just have a grasp and an understanding about what would fit in the game, and then get a first version in as soon as possible and try to test it out, and then just fix stuff, because stuff will show up that you never thought of. But get a version in and test it.
Hey, I like to talk a lot as well, and I was wondering regarding like the Uncharted clip, because that feature can break players' immersion like a lot. So I was wondering in your work, like how much do you think about or are involved in the decision of, is this design too immersion breaking, and more the aesthetic side. I was just wondering, like, how much are you involved in that, and how much do you think about that in working for MachineGames?
Yeah, that's a good question. It's a lot. I think about it a lot, and I'm involved about it a lot, because game design, like, it would be easier, like just conveying a feature to your player would be easier if you could just write a text, like a lot of people do when you start their game. They're like, this is how you play the game. It's a lot harder to design a feature that would be perceived as intuitive by the player. And often when you encounter intuitive features in games, like if you play Inside, there's no tutorial. Like you just play the game and you do everything you can do with the game without anyone telling you how to do it. And then you feel smart. It's like, I figured this out. But really, it's the game designers that were smart that made you think that, this is so intuitive. Because, that is very intertwined with game design, and it's one of the big challenges to like convey the feature and make the player understand the feature, and hopefully also like the feature.
Hi, great talk.
Thank you.
I want to ask you, you work specifically as a game designer only?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I was wondering about the ratio between like game designers and programmers and game designers and graphical artists. Like how many game designers are there per programmer or artist?
Oh, that depends a lot. I mean, there are big companies that have like, they can have a team of like 3 game designers, and they can have like hundreds of people implementing it. And there are teams that have like, the game designer is also a programmer, or a programmer and an artist. So it's hard to answer that question because it's so diverse. Depends on the scope of the project, like how much, like who you're backed up. Like, do you have a huge publisher? Because in studios that have huge publishers and infinite amount of money, they can have a few game designers and hundreds of programmers. Smaller studios, you are expected as a game designer to also do like scripting or programming or art.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, great talk.
Thank you.
Thanks for being the first person to mention that before this year at Game here there were only artists or programmers. Now they're trying to also cut that in pieces.
Mm-hmm.
I was wondering, you said that you got your job as a Q&A. What kind of job did you do?
So it's not Q&A, it's QA.
Yeah, quality assurance.
Exactly. So basically what you do is you play the game, identify bugs, report the bugs, and you follow up on those bugs. It sounds easy. And I know a lot of people think like there's also a term that goes around which is beta tester or beta tester. That doesn't exist in the game industry at all. Like you can't work as a beta tester. It's impossible. You work as a QA. It sounds easy, and there's kind of a stigma to it because people see it as like, you play games and you get paid for it. But it's extremely hard work, and it demands your full attention, and you have to be analytical and all those skills, the communication skills and stuff that you need as a game designer also applies as a QA. So basically what I did is play the game, find bugs, get test requests, like someone would come in and say, we have this feature, test this, run up and down these stairs for 7 hours while crouching and chaining weapons and reloading and quick saving and quick loading and like stuff like that every day. So yeah, that's what I did.
Hello, great
Hello.
talk.
Thank you.
So you were talking about reverse engineering good design or design in general. Do you also reverse engineer bad design?
Yeah.
And what do you get out of it?
I don't like when it comes to reverse engineering bad design. It's not usually bad design is not deliberate design. It's just like bad stuff that happens in the game. So when something like that happens in the game, like what I do is like, why did that happen? I try to reverse engineer. I'm trying to find a example, but on top of my head I can't do it. But if there's something bad that happens in the game, you just try to like, why is that? Why did they add that? Did they just neglect it? Didn't they think it was a big problem? Am I the only one who thinks it's a big problem? So like you can talk to your friends, and you try to, just like you do with good design or design in general, try to like reverse engineer, take a few steps back. Maybe this feature, maybe this bad thing that happened in the game is unavoidable because of level design or other game design or systems that interact with each other that give birth to a dynamic that's negative. Usually those get squashed out as bugs or not intended design, but there's a lot of games where stuff like that sneaks through, and that's when you hone in on it and it's like, what is that? Why do they do that?
Yeah, hi. First of all, great talk, as
Thank you.
someone else has mentioned. And you first said that you worked on Wolfenstein: The New Order and Old Blood as well. And then you said you worked a little bit on Doom as well.
Yeah.
Which part and to what extent did you work on that title?
Well, id Software's Doom, since id Software is owned by ZeniMax, it's a part of the whole Bethesda family. We are also owned by ZeniMax and part of the whole Bethesda family. And this is very normal when it comes to large AAA titles like Doom, is that other studios in the same concern gets together and help out. So it's hard to point to a specific, like, I did that barrel or something. It's hard to point because it was help out in all ways possible where you could help out. So in specifically like the MachineGames support team that helped out with Doom, we had overarching responsibility. We had overarching responsibility for a few levels, and that includes everything, like the walkthroughs, the design. If there's any special game design elements in those levels, we had the scripting, the combat, the everything. So we helped out where help was needed.
Yeah, I have a follow-up question as well.
Mm-hmm.
Since both, especially Doom, I myself study game design, so I feel that Doom especially is there are a lot of connections you can see that are, Doom is all about the pacing.
Yeah.
It's very fast-paced combat, and everything is designed around that. Like, for example, aiming down the sights, or to some degree, but it's useless.
You don't reload?
Yeah, exactly. No reload, and chainsaw has ammunition, so that affects the pacing and so forth.
Yeah.
And how has the work there helped you as a game designer to that extent, or as well Wolfenstein as well?
Absolutely, absolutely. And basically every experience that you can get as a game designer will help you in the future as a game designer. And even if I was to work on, I don't know, some kind of Candy Crush clone, that would still give me experience as a game designer that I would most probably be able to use in my future game designing, even if it's like a fast action-paced game like Doom. So I'm not saying that features can carry over from one game to another, but as a game designer, as a professional in the games industry, every notch you get on your belt will help you out and will be very valuable to you. So I would say absolutely. Thank you.
Okay. Hey, I also want to say I really like to talk.
Thank you.
I also really liked the New Order,
Nice.
and I played it through on the hardest difficulty.
Sweet.
Because that's the type of gamer I am.
Uber difficulty or?
The hardest.
Uber or Mein Leben?
Well, I can't remember now. But I think it was the hardest that I was able to choose in the beginning.
Awesome. Yeah.
Yeah. And no real complaints there. I thought it was a really good, really good experience, and a really good game. I wanted to ask you about the game design that goes into the different difficulties, and because it's like hit scanning and damage, like. But how much of that goes into like your job? That's my question.
It overlaps basically. So we have scripters that are focused on scripting and balancing. And like, you know, hit points and damage and stuff like that. But there's also the overarching like game design and philosophy of, okay, so if a player plays this game on hard, they most probably, or the hardest, they most probably have played the game on normal. So the amount of difficulty or sadism can be cranked up depending on the game. There are some formulas that are formulated by the game designers that play a role in, for example, the New Order. If you play it on hard Uber, there are some penalties to, for example, your damage, and there are some boosts to the player to the AI damage, and
that's boring.
Well, those kinds of decisions get made by game design. But when it comes to difficulty of each enemies and stuff, they carry over different difficulty levels, but they are modified by modifiers that tweak around a bit.
Is there tweaking to the spawn rate, like not the rate, but where they spawn, or like stuff like that?
I don't think there's in New Order. I don't think the spawn rate or where they spawn is affected, but. No, I don't think so at all. But there might be. Someone might have snuck that in. I'm on top of my head. I cannot say if there was or if there wasn't.
Okay, I guess. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, great talk again.
Thank you.
I had a question about, because you mentioned earlier, like stop playing Valve and stop playing a lot of games.
Yeah.
But for me as a game designer, and I also think I had this problem while I studied here, when you work in different groups, people have different experience from different games. They say like, oh, we should get inspired by this game. Do you have any tips or ideas on how you can like stay on top of different ideas from different games while still focusing on like your studies and actual game design?
Yeah, that's a very good question. And the key word here is moderation. So play World of Warcraft, play Dota, play CSGO, play every game that comes out, and that's also a very good library as a game designer to get. Like you get references, so people can say, oh no, this pistol is something between the smart gun, I think it's called a smart gun, in Titanfall, and the gravity gun in Half-Life. So if you haven't played those games, you're like, I don't know what to tell you. So that's part of our jobs as game designers to play games, get a huge reference of a library of references, and then use those in everyday communication of game design. So play games, just keep it in moderation. 4 hours a day, World of Warcraft, the whole week, not very well spent time. No more questions? We have one.
So I'm just curious about like what's the ratio between a game designer at MachineGames doing scripting versus like paper prototype and like game documents? What do you start with when you make a game design feature or whatever?
Paper, because it's a lot of different. I mean, this does not have to be. How should I formulate this? It depends a lot on what engine you use, what workflow that engine has, and what studio you're in. For example, using Unity is super ultra helpful for game designers to just get a feature in, test it out, prototype it. But the engine workflow and stuff that we use, it's better for me as a game designer and the team as a whole if I start by sitting down with pen and paper. So there's no, we never start out by whiteboxing or trying in engine. But we try to do that as quickly as possible after we have the paper, of course.
Do you have any games you would recommend that are good to analyze?
It depends, because like if I would say Doom, someone would say, well, maybe I don't like Doom. I don't like to play that game. For example, there are people that swear by Dark Souls. They love Dark Souls, like they breathe Dark Souls. They would have a Dark Soul tattoo if it was socially acceptable. And I want to get in on that. I'm like, I'm gonna try that game because I want to be so immersed in that game. And I've been trying. I've tried hard. I've played Dark Souls 1. I tried playing Dark Souls 2. Even jumped on Bloodborne. But then I'm like, okay. I get it why people like this game, but it's not my cup of tea. So my answer to you is like any game you like, just analyze it. Any game, like it can be everything from Arma 3 to Peggle. Peggle is a very good game to analyze. Like, why do they do this? What's the point of this feature, like, or this sound effect? So it's basically everything from what you play on your mobile phone to what you play on your PS4. Analyze it. Do it.
Yeah, I got a second question. You're designing for AAA now.
Mm-hmm.
Would you say it's easy? I'm thinking as an artist, it could be quite difficult to change styles. Do you feel that you can just jump into a mobile game, or are you leaning towards AAA now since you've been doing it? Would it be a big change for you? Do you see where I'm getting at?
Yeah, I can see. Like, I don't think the transition for a game designer from working on a AAA to going to midcore or mobile game is as brutal and contrasting as it would be for example, an artist. So no, I don't think it would be very hard. I think it would be hard, but definitely an obstacle that's overcomable.
All right, so I was wondering, when you're writing designs, and especially in bigger companies, where the roles are more spread out and more specialized, when you're writing a design, how much power do you have over the more aesthetic things, like the how it should feel and look and sound? Like, how much of that do you do and how much is up to, for example, the art director or the lead sound designer or whatever?
Yeah, that's a good question, because when you make that design, when you make the game design, you can have it would be nice if, and you can have suggestions if it sounded something like this or if it looked something like this. But as a game designer, you should not be concerned with the look and feel of it. You should be concerned with the mechanics of it. And if your design is tight and good, it should not depend on look and feel. For example, like chess, which is a super tightly designed game that it doesn't matter. Like, you can play with like shot glasses or marbles or anything, but it's still a very good game. Same strategy, same like it's the same war going on. So if your design relies on looks and feels, like this guy should be this color, or it should sound something like this, then that's a sign of a lacking design. And hopefully, if your design is tight enough, those looks and feels will be added by the audio director and art director, and it will mesh perfectly with the design.
Cool. It's been a while now, so great talk.
Thank you.
I wanted to ask you, now that you've done this for a few years, comparing your initial design, or sort of as you ship it off and it starts going into production, compared to the finished product, how much of that is revised? Was it 80% accurate, or was it 20%, or how much differs, and how much is revised consciously and just happens?
Yeah, that's a very good question, because it changes a lot. Like, no design survives contact with the enemy. It doesn't. So, and that's also why one of the points were like, don't cling to your design, because it needs to change, because it will change. Like, you can design and think out everything on paper and put it very neatly and compartmentalize everything, and then when you get it into the game, you're like, whoa, I didn't think about this, or these two features, I did not think that they would interact in a way where the player could do this. So I would say, like, it's hard to say a percentage, sure, but like half of it, if not more, gets changed during, like, not just from the start to the finish. I would say 90% or something, but from the, like, month to month, you need to not change it, like throw away and write something new, but tweak it. And after you've been doing that for a few months, you're like, wow, this is so different from, like, it should still capture the point of the first design, but the rules and the interactions and how it plays out will probably be a lot different. All right, no more questions? Well then, thank you.